Hello and welcome to the next edition of Beyond the Numbers, BDONI's series of discussions with some of our clients and influencers and referrers. I'm Michael Jennings. I'm advisory partner at BDO, and I'm delighted that I'm joined today by Kevin McVeigh, corporate banking partner at Elliotts Legal. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
Yes, it's lovely to join you today.
It's great to be here.
We were looking to have a general discussion and chat this morning around M&A and what we're seeing in the marketplace and some of the activity that's been happening over the last 12 months. And I know it's been a busy time for both ourselves and yourselves. So I was just wanting to get your thoughts on that and how you're finding things.
Yes, well, it has been busy, and we're seeing the M&A market evolving in a number of different areas. There's private equity investment, which is a relative newcomer to Northern Ireland. And then there's the more traditional MBO, the management buyout. And then also a new development is the employee ownership trust. So that's been not just keeping us busy, but also meaning that we have to react and develop our skills and develop our people so that we're able to provide those services.
Yes, we've done a number of transactions together on the MBO front and again, obviously working together and looking at employee ownership trusts. And how in particular have you found those more complex or more straightforward, or how have you found those and getting the deals done?
Well, in the employee ownership trust, it's like a sale because there's the current owners of the company are selling, and there is a buyer. In this case, it's the cohort of employees who are going to become the new owners. But it's different in the sense that the employees all need independent legal advice. In most of our traditional sales of businesses, you're providing legal advice to the seller or you're providing legal advice to the buyer. So you have this group of employees, all perhaps at disparate ages and levels within the business, and they all have to be brought along and advised on the terms of the deal. And it's a tax structured deal where the employee, the seller receives tax incentives to sell to their employees.
Yes.
And so it suits businesses that don't have a natural succession plan within a family, or it suits if there isn't an obvious buyer in the marketplace. And then there are also those founders of companies who feel an obligation, a sense of duty to their employees, that they want to hand something over to them when they exit.
Yes.
And this is a very good structure which allows the employees to become the owners and then to become incentivized to run the business themselves.
And from our perspective, I suppose, because those senior management are already heavily involved in working in the business, there's perhaps a more high level of due diligence that's required because they're more familiar with the numbers and the performance of the business. So in that respect, it helps to smooth the process.
It does. In that sense, it's like an MBO because the people who are buying it already know the business, and so if you were acting for the buyers, the employees, and you were raising inquiries about the company, the seller would simply say, well, ask your client because they know the business as well, if not better than I do.
Exactly.
So there's limited due diligence, which certainly cuts down on the time involved in a transaction, EOT transaction. But there are other complications as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, we've seen obviously after COVID, a lot of individuals taking stock and thinking about lifestyle choices and what do I want to do for the future and sort of planning for retirement and getting ready for that. So there's been an increase in sales and M&A transactions as a result. And we've seen the introduction of private equity into the marketplace. So have you found that and dealing with that in the marketplace and the attitude towards private equity?
Yes, we've done two recent private equity transactions where we were acting for the company. I think it's becoming more popular. I think the more people understand how it works, people are familiar with Dragon's Den and the idea that you set up a company and then at some point somebody comes along, not to buy the entire company, but to invest money, strategic investment in the company for a certain percentage of the company. And I think it's becoming more popular. It's an alternative to a sale. In one of the transactions we did, it allowed some of the shareholders to exit, but some of the shareholders to stay on as receiving part cash and part equity in the business.
In the new structure.
And the cultural difference, I think, for the founders, the shareholders, is getting used to the idea that they're not able to make decisions themselves anymore. The private equity company perhaps might take a minority shareholding. They might take something less than 25% of the shares.
Yes.
But they expect things to be done either in consultation with them or by agreement with them. So I think if someone is an entrepreneur and have set up a business and then receive an approach from a private equity investor, one of the key things for them to understand is the world will change for them. There will be somebody sitting at the board table. In the past, they may have had informal meetings over a cup of coffee. There will be more structured meetings with a new chairperson will usually be appointed to the company.
Yes.
So the private equity investor is making an investment because it's a good business that's making money, and they want the same people to run it so that they can go off and make another investment somewhere else. So they don't, in my experience, they don't tend to be interfering in the business that they're investing in because they're trusting the people, but the people need to understand that they have this new critical friend, so to speak, sitting around the table with them who will forensically examine what they're doing, and as long as the numbers are good, they'll they shouldn't interfere.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we've seen is in the past, as you know, in Northern Ireland, a lot of businesses are family businesses. And there's been a reluctance to embrace that opportunity, but that's definitely changing, and more transactions happening. And we have a number of clients now who have gone through that process and are enjoying it and the benefits that come with it from the expansion and the growth and the structure. And actually with some clients who are now through the sort of 5 to 7 year window and are about to embark on the next phase, and sometimes the funder's rolling over and going again, or a new funder coming online. And I suppose also in the marketplace we're seeing that growth lead some companies to look at consolidation and look at diversification. Have you seen much of that as well?
Yes, there are acquisitions, strategic acquisitions of smaller players within a marketplace, and particularly businesses where there isn't a succession plan and it's a small family-owned business, and a competitor who knows them very well will often contact them and say, what are your plans? We're acting in the sale of a company at the moment, and it's a family-owned company, and they've been working with an English customer for many, many years, and the customer has been over to see them and said, what are your plans for the future?
Yes.
And that was an introduction to a conversation about, we would be interested in acquiring you because while we're currently your customer, we see a strategic benefit for our business of having our own base in Northern Ireland.
Yes, of course. And that probably leads me on to thinking about what actually makes a deal work, and where there's sometimes pitfalls to watch out for. And some of the transactions that we've seen, and it's be useful to get your thoughts, I think, around culture and fit, and dealing with a buyer team and a seller team, and what actually makes a successful transaction in terms of getting the deal across the line, and then also actually making it a success post-sale.
For us, it's good to be involved as early as possible in a transaction. So when the seller first has the thought of selling the business, that they come and speak to us as well as to their accountants, because you can help them to prepare the business for sale. That's one thing which we found very useful, is the idea of what we would call vendor due diligence.
Yes.
Where the seller actually helps itself by getting lawyers in before there's even a preferred bidder or an identified buyer. And we would review everything from their property title deeds, their employment contracts, their banking arrangements, and advise them on what perhaps enhancements or changes they might want to make to avoid pitfalls with a buyer.
Yes.
So there's that at the outset, and that's always useful when we get involved early. And it's not just because it's in our interest to do it, but it does mean it's time well spent, because when you do then find the buyer, you're in a position to just provide them with all of the information, and everything's been reviewed in advance, and we anticipate the questions that a buyer will ask. But then in terms of who the buyer is, there does need to be a cultural fit, and people who can work together, people who think of the business in the same way, people who feel about their employees in the same way. Because one thing I have found over the years is owners have a real sense of duty and loyalty to their staff. And one of the key questions that we hear being asked of a buyer is, what are your intentions in relation to the staff? They want to know that the staff will be kept on as a minimum, but also that their employment will be enhanced, and that the plans are for growth.
Absolutely.
And bringing on new people. So it's unlikely to work if the seller feels that sense of obligation to staff, and the buyer is the type of person who is perhaps a little more cutthroat.
Yes.
So there's a need for a cultural fit, people who get on, and particularly if the seller is going to stay involved in the business. And we know from experience that recently there's very few cases where a seller will just shake hands, take the payment of the sale proceeds and walk away. A lot of the time the sellers remain involved in the business. And that's either because the buyer needs them involved, the seller has the relationship with the customers, and there needs to be a transition period so that there's a handover by the seller to the buyer, and customers are reassured that there's no change and nothing for them to be concerned about. But also, a lot of deals are structured where the buyer doesn't pay all of the money up front, that there's a certain amount of money deferred.
Yes.
So it's in the seller's interests in those cases to stay involved in the business, because if the business remains profitable and becomes even more profitable, then the seller is going to get paid the deferred amount.
Yes, I think we've seen increasingly businesses look at the vendor due diligence option on the accountancy side as well, and to plan properly well in advance, and to go through that due diligence process, get all the information together, create a portal that's available if they're doing a sales process. I think that shows a really strong level of professionalism.
Yes.
And that they're serious about a deal.
Absolutely.
And that's worked well. And as you say, that can also help to identify any problems that might result down the line. For instance, we've seen one that come up regularly where there's employee issues, and should employees be treated as employees or subcontractors? And have you seen that and experienced that in the legal side?
Yes, the vendor due diligence will hopefully identify things like that. We would review the contracts of employment, but not just the paper contracts, but ask the owners about the operation of the business and how the employees are engaged.
Yes.
Because if someone is being described as a self-employed or an agent of the business, but we examine the terms and find out that they're engaged 100% of their time with no authority on their part to decide where they're going to work and how many hours they're going to work, then they are an employee, most likely.
Yes,
if it looks like an employee and walks like an employee, it probably is an employee. So we have those have tax implications then, and payroll implications, and you'd rather not have the buyer identify those and flag them up. If they are issues, let's get them sorted out.
Absolutely.
In advance. We've also had examples where we've been looking at the property title deeds and the property information and found an absence of planning permissions, and so we've had to get the client to apply for retrospective planning permissions or regularization certificates from a local council for building works that have been done. And it's much better to have those in the portal, in the data room when the buyer is identified, than to have the buyer come and tell us that this is what's needed and then cause delay and perhaps a suggestion that the seller hadn't got their house in order when they decided to sell the business.
Yes, yes. And I suppose we touched on the level of busyness earlier, and some of the sectors that we've seen, whether that's food and healthcare
Yeah.
and technology and also professional services.
Yeah.
And have you seen, I know you maybe referred earlier to healthcare, have you seen many others where that's really coming to the fore?
Yes, we worked on one private equity investment in the healthcare sector, and we're working on a sale of a business in the healthcare sector as well at the moment. So some of them are, as I mentioned, private equity investments. Others are trade sales where it's a larger provider of healthcare, whether it's care homes or nursing homes. Again, harder for the small one person business to operate in that very heavily regulated sector.
Yes.
With the RQIA and everything else, you need a certain minimum size, a certain critical mass to be able to not just run the business, but comply with all the regulation.
Yes, I think we've seen the same in the wealth sector and
Yeah.
financial investment, where there's more and more consolidation for the same reasons, just
Yeah.
being compliant with FCA regulations and all of that comes with that. You need a certain critical mass.
And in the legal market as well, in the professional services sector that we both work in, it's heavily regulated. Everything from identifying your client, what we call the onboarding of clients, where you have to know everything about them for anti-money laundering purposes, and then the regulation by the Law Society. It's very difficult for a firm with one or two partners to carry out their work and comply with all of the regulations. So we're seeing more and more consolidation, firms merging or coming together.
Yes, that probably leads us on quite nicely to our next discussion actually around that. We've done quite a bit of work around that on both the legal side and the accountancy side. And profiling, I think the Northern Ireland marketplace has about 400 law firms.
Yeah.
And obviously you've recently gone through a process yourselves, and it was a pleasure to be involved in advising you on that from BDO's perspective. How have you found that whole process now in the joining forces of Johns Elliott and Elliott of Figard into the newly formed Elliott Legal?
Well, we're very pleased, and first of all, thanks to you and your BDO colleagues, because it was your help that really got us to the completion of that transaction. Not just the financial due diligence, but the advice on how we might approach it. It's very good. It's Johns Elliott are a great firm who we've known for many years, and a very well established reputation. There were some personal relationships where some of our people knew some of their people, and then once we started talking to them, I think it became apparent very early on that the cultures of the firms were similar.
Yes.
And the firms' reputations were similar in the marketplace, and well deserved, I think, if I can say that for ourselves, for a reputation of integrity and good service and looking after clients, but also looking after staff as well.
Yes.
And people. And we are people businesses at the end of the day. And again, coming back to what we were saying earlier, it's important that you know that before you do any kind of a merger or a joining together of businesses, that the people will be able to work together. And over the months that we were talking to the partners in Johns Elliott, it became very obvious to me that we would all be able to work together. And the larger firm, it's very exciting to be part of it now, Elliotts Legal. The larger firm not only allows us to provide enhanced services to our existing clients, but each firm's clients, we can find ways that we can provide additional services that previously we couldn't, because we now have a greater team with more skills and resources. We can also go out looking for more work because we can offer something that we couldn't before.
Yes.
And then it also has a benefit in recruitment and retention, because as a larger firm, having recently gone through a merger and a great buzz about the firm, it's something that we can offer to people, not just to stay with us, but also to come and join us as well.
Yes. Well, listen, very best wishes for the future for Elliotts Legal.
Thank
And it's
you.
great to see that come to fruition and go from strength to strength, hopefully for the future.
For us, this makes sense on so many levels, but also one of these intangibles is that it gives everybody a real shot in the arm.
Yes.
Everybody feels energized
There's a good buzz.
about it.
Yeah.
And that's something I suppose which we hadn't necessarily anticipated, and you don't know it's going to happen until it does.
Yes.
So that's
nice when both
that's
teams come
been
together.
very welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. The other area that we could touch upon is actually the whole developments around AI and technology and software, which again for professional services, but across the board are becoming more and more prevalent.
Yeah.
Robotics and automation and all of that really trying to drive more efficiency into businesses.
Yeah.
How have you seen that in the legal side and on deals and actually for your own business?
Well, we're obviously having to look at the use of AI in our business. It's become quite a talking point in legal sectors. There are obvious ways that AI can be used to enhance the carrying out of research, for example. But it's not without its risks as well. We have been aware of cases where most recently lawyers were presenting bundles of their pleadings to the judge in a case, and there were a number of cases that were totally fictitious because the lawyer had used AI to generate they'd asked the AI bot provide a list of all the relevant cases in this area.
Yes.
And some of them didn't exist. And the court made an order that the lawyers have to pay the wasted costs of all sides involved in that transaction. So it's definitely here to stay. We would be sticking our head in the sand if we thought we can operate without it. And there are real advantages both to us and to the clients if we can use it properly. But given what I said about reputation and integrity,
yes,
one of the things you then, a wise man once said to me, your reputation arrives on foot and leaves in a sports car. So you have to be very careful if you do anything that could endanger or damage your reputation. So I think we probably wouldn't want to be trailblazers, but we will have to be reasonably early adopters of AI if we're going to compete. And if we're going to be able to provide clients with a service that they then come to expect.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing the same both for BDO and also for our clients, that people are open to it and embracing it. Yeah. But it's again, making sure that you're doing that in a measured way and being sensible and obviously watching out for any of those concerns around fictitious information. And I know a lot of clients have sort of embraced the robotics and automation and then looked for opportunities to upskill their staff and have been very successful at doing that and providing opportunities for growth. And I suppose the other area that links in with some of that is also the whole ESG agenda and trying to deal with all the climate targets that are coming at us down the line. And how have you found that in terms of deals and yourselves?
We find that in particular when we're asked to submit a tender for legal services, and we have to provide evidence of what we're doing to satisfy certain ESG criteria, and that means we have to take seriously our own carbon footprint and how we operate the firm and how we look after our own people and what contribution we make to the wider society.
Yeah, and the same for us. We've started to try to measure that on an annual basis and feed into those stats and make sure that we're seeking for improvements. Well, look, listen, it's been fantastic to chat this morning, Kevin. There's a lot of areas there that I think are driving the M&A market when you think about it across the board. We've touched on retirements and consolidation, diversification, but all of those other factors around AI and the costs that are coming at us really mean you need financial strength and you need investment to be able to deal with all of that. So thank you very much for taking the time this morning and for being available to chat through. That in summary really wraps up our discussion this morning on M&A. It's been very useful to talk to Kevin this morning and hear his insights, and hopefully you find that very useful as well. So thank you very much.